new day, solutions. Yeah!
All right, so this is Graham here.
And this is Ashkahn.
And today's question is, I have a no-tolerance policy for coming in intoxicated. But in practice, how should I enforce this?
Interesting.
So I guess to start with, we have the same policy at Float On of not coming in intoxicated. This counts for, I assume you mean customers, but we also apply it to staff.
Sometimes.
And ourselves.
And this is our weekly meeting, and then you're not allowed to be intoxicated.
It's not a word. So it is though, right? I mean, first of all, how do you tell if someone's intoxicated? And I guess the things that we're worried about kind of inform what our decisions are and how we treat the customers coming in. And there's also what you're intoxicated on and how crazy people are acting, you know?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like let's start there, because I feel like if someone's drunk, it's kind of like one of the easier scenarios, because it's pretty hard to hide if you're drunk, you know what I mean? That's one of those scenarios where you can kind of be like, all right, buddy.
Smell alcohol on their breath.
Have you been drinking
stumbling,
tonight?
Walking in, slurring their words when they get there. I mean, yeah, you got to turn them away, right? I mean, so I guess that's the cutting to the end of all of this is, you know, in most cases, you just have to put your foot down and actually turn people away is our base level suggestion. And it's kind of weird because float tanks are so tied to the marijuana scene and through Joe Rogan to psychedelics and things like that. So I think they have almost this stigma or a reputation, I guess, of going in altered states that other practices don't, perhaps. Right.
I mean, and I guess drinking is almost interesting in the sense that, I just don't even think it would be an enjoyable experience at all. If you were to be drunk in a float tank.
Or do you hear that? There's not podcasters out there being like, man, I went in totally hammered to a float tank and just had a spiritual awakening, you know? That's not the reports that people are getting, so.
It's also very uncommon. I don't think a lot of people are getting slashed and going floating. Getting tanked is, I guess.
Going tanked. Getting tanked. We're getting tanked, yeah.
But, so that one really has not come up too often for us.
And, below that, if someone's had just a couple beers or something like that for the night, I've also never had any issues with that. Someone going in after having a drink or a couple drinks is not a problem. So it really is that, actually drunk level.
And then I guess there's smoking weed.
Yep. So, and we're in Oregon.
Yep.
It's just where this podcast is being done and where our float center is.
Yep.
And it's just recreational marijuana is legal. People can smoke at home and come in. I guess people can drink at home too, but puts it in the same category, I guess, as alcohol as far as legality goes.
Yeah. That one I haven't really had any problems with. I mean, if someone comes gallivanting into your shop and is I'm going to smoke this blunt in your bathroom, you'd have to be oh, no, you can't do that. But, other than that, I mean, most people are just doing whatever they want to do in that sense on their own time before coming into our place. It's pretty hard to tell. There's not many ways we could stop them. It doesn't really seem like that big of a deal.
Yeah, I mean, I guess someone eating a really strong edible or something like that might be more of a concern than smoking a little pot for us, just in the sense that it hasn't hit yet. They're not intoxicated. Right. They can be if you're smoking pot and you get to the point where you're nervous and panicky and you're just way too stoned, I mean, you're probably not coming in, A. And if you do, then it's the same thing as being just ridiculously drunk or something, you know?
Yeah. To me, it's not really something that you can do anything about or really need to do anything about. I mean, there's no way you can stop it. I think people smoking weed all over the place everywhere now. And if that's just their MO, that's their MO, and they're going to do it before coming into float. And I have never heard a horror story of man, this person was so high on weed that they did this in my float center.
So I have for edibles, though.
For edibles?
Yep. Of people just getting a little too high on edibles and not realizing how strong they were. You know, and I think this happens too for
and what happened to the float center?
I mean, so
they had a bad experience as a floater?
Yeah, they had a bad experience as a floater.
Okay. So that's different than man, they tore the room up or some actual consequences.
Sure. Yeah, totally. They didn't die in the float tank or anything like that. They just they felt like they were going to die. That was the end of the experience pretty much was.
I mean, really the crux of this, when we get to all this stuff, harder than weed and everything, there's only so much you can actually do in practice, right? like taking an edible is a great example of like how would you even possibly begin to stop that, right? Like someone could eat it before they come into your shop and it won't kick in until after you've given them a walkthrough and they're in your float tank. Like it's genuinely, I mean, you'd have to start like sampling people's blood or something, and even that wouldn't do it. Like,
which is what we're moving to at Float On too. Full body cavity search, blood sampling.
Even a cavity search wouldn't do it. Like like it's in their body.
It's true. Like organ search. Yeah, it's intense.
So I mean, and this is the case with other stuff too, right? Like we have heard one or two, kind of quote unquote horror stories of harder drugs like ketamine and stuff like that, and often still in those scenarios, it's someone who came in sober, went into their float room, did what they were going to do in their float room, and then hopped into the float tank and then had some sort of freak out experience. And it's like, how do you prevent that? I mean, short of literally like searching through people's possessions and doing a cavity search, like there's no way to stop something like that from happening.
Yeah, and especially things like ketamine are kind of interesting because they have such a short duration. Like someone can come in sober, do ketamine in the room, come out sober, and you would have never known,
right?
Essentially. And there's, again, like there's not only no way to stop it, there's no way to even know if that's happening or control for it at all.
So essentially there's really only two spots where you have any decision-making or judgment calls to make in this. Like one is if someone literally just shows you drugs in your center, right?
right. I'm going to do these. Hop in that tank.
So that's like scenario one.
In which case I still say like turn them away. Say like, no, you can't do that is the solution to scenario one.
Yeah, and it has happened to us before. Like people just show like, and it's on like, even when it has happened, I'm like, dude, why would you show that to me? Like I can't, that this was a bad idea. So that was, and then scenario two is the much more difficult one, which is just seeing someone and have like you making this kind of decision that someone seems intoxicated or doesn't seem like an appropriate state to get into a float tank. Which
can, and again, I guess there's even mini scenarios within that, right? There's the one where someone's really obviously out of it.
Right.
And not able to focus and is very clearly on something, in which case turn them away. Like that's almost an easy decision.
But it's kind of more just like a huge gradient is the problem.
Exactly, yeah.
Right? Like how do you...
It's rare too that's the case. I mean, we have had to turn away people that are like almost unable to even check themselves in because they're tripping so hard or something like that, and it's like, okay, man, like...
Very rarely.
Yeah.
But it's also, it's a very like delicate sort of, you don't want to say that to someone and then to not be on drugs and just to be kind of who they are, you know what I mean? It's like, how do you make the decision to say like, hey, you don't seem like you're acting normal?
Like oh, are you pregnant question you should probably never ask people, Like it's very similar
it's very like similar to that.
And I had a friend who had a speech impediment, and a couple different times he actually got kicked out of bars because they said he'd been drinking too much and he hadn't had a single drink. It was just that he naturally slurred his speech,
right.
And like that was always really offensive and frustrating for him. And he at the time, of course, would be like, no, I'm not drunk, which I guess is what drunks say as well. So it was difficult. But it's the same thing, right? So someone comes in, there's this gradient, and you kind of have to decide that they don't just slur their speech naturally or don't have a limp or aren't naturally spacey or something like that, or just like really excited, or it's interesting.
I mean, I guess most people have waivers, and there's something on there where you say, I've not taken any drugs or alcohol.
Yeah, but
and that's it's a little bit of protection.
Yeah, and I guess so let's just talk a little bit more about that. Like let's assume they signed a waiver saying they weren't on stuff, but they're within that weird nebulous gradient where you think that they might be. What do people do then, Ashkahn?
I don't know, like shut down, open a different business, not have to deal with these sorts of questions.
I mean, so at least at Float On, I guess we teach people to be delicate, but definitely if they feel like someone is on the side of intoxication where it does feel like there could be an issue or they might, either accidentally like drown themselves or hit some kind of issue in the tank or, try to pull our conduit off the walls or something crazy, to feel comfortable making that. And we as business owners also say that we'll stand beside their decisions if there are people that they don't want coming in. And I guess beyond, there's no way to define that gray area. So in my mind, it's a lot about, empowering either yourself or your staff or your business as a whole to use their faculties as human beings and actually kind of make that judgment call for themselves, and also know that the business is going to stand behind them. Like, we're not going to fire someone if they come back and get angry because we said they were intoxicated and now they're trying to like sue us or something for defamation because they weren't intoxicated. Like, we'll still stand behind our employees' decision there, because that's part of giving them, I guess, their own authority or capacity to choose. And that said, it almost never comes up.
No, these are pretty rare scenarios.
Yep. Gosh, I was going to say a few times a year, but I'm not even sure if it's that for the amount of time we have to kick someone out or deny them a float. Like, maybe once a year or something like that. Like, once in 10,000 plus floats is what we're talking about here. So, it's a tricky question, I guess.
I think it is. I think it's hard to answer in definitive terms just because it really ends up depending so much on the person, the context, and you're just kind of in that situation. You make a decision to be like, hey, like, have you had any drinks or anything? Because we can't let you into the float if you had. Or I think it's just comfortably in that gray area where it's hard to have any kind of set policies or answers or things that will solve these things in the abstract.
So hopefully us meandering through this subject has been useful for you. And as always, if you have any other questions, any other hardballs you want to toss at us, where you can do that at floattanksolutions.com/podcast. And we will talk to you tomorrow.
Thanks, everybody.